So I ask you, how can we make sure that U.S. weapons do not end up in the hands of the Janjaweed? How can we ensure that U.S. weapons aren't being used to murder political protesters in Sudan?
All of our partnerships on a security sense, including some that are economic, are predicated on our interests, on U.S. interests. But that's not new. That's not unique to this administration or the previous administration or back to the time of Washington. We develop partnerships because of what works best for U.S. interests.
All right, Patriots, you just saw that quick snippet, and wow, that's just a small taste of what we're about to break down. You saw Ilhan Omar going after Clark Cooper over arms sales, coming in with some pretty bold accusations. You know the routine, the same old playbook from the left. But stick around, because Mr. Cooper really stands out in the full exchange. He doesn't let himself get pushed around. We're about to watch the entire clip, and I'll break down exactly how he takes control of the conversation and ends up making her entire line of questioning look, well, let's just say less than informed. Before we get into it, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment below telling me what you think about this kind of grandstanding in Congress. Now, let's get into the main event.
Comments what you think about this kind of grandstanding in Congress. Now, let's get into the main event.
So it's no secret that, within line of what my colleague from New York said, Saudi Arabia and the Emirates are brutal regimes. They export brutality. They crush democratic movements abroad directly and indirectly. I also believe that they have been funders of terrorists. And we have heard reports that they're transferring U.S. weapons to Al-Qaeda. I believe that our relationship with them in its current form is immoral, but it's not only immoral, it's counterproductive to our national security. I believe in trusting them to protect our needs and protecting us against terroristic threats is like trusting a thief to protect your shop. This administration selling them billions of dollars of weapons is dangerous and it's outrageous. Doing so is open disregard for the will of Congress and the American people, slap in the face to our democracy and our values. Twice in the last 25 years, Saudi Arabia and the Emirates have invaded Bahrain to crash democratic uprising. The Saudis actively supported the Egyptian coup in 2013. In April of this year, the United Nations finally believed they were on the verge of negotiating peace in Libya. This has instead collapsed into a civil war. Haftar has waged his bloody campaign with Saudi backing and Emirate weapons. More recently in Sudan, Hemeti visited MPS in Jeddah, and shortly after that, him and the Janjaweed immediately began murdering democratic protesters by the hundreds. It's clear that state sees Saudi hand in the crackdown. Since David Hale called MPS's brother, Khalid bin Salam, to ask him to use Saudi influence to stop the killings. This is a disturbing pattern of destabilization and totalitarianism. Backing the Saudi and the Emirates is backing war crimes and crimes against humanity. Providing them with arms is complicity. So I ask you, how can we make sure that U.S. weapons do not end up in the hands of the Janjaweed? How can we ensure that U.S. weapons aren't being used to murder political protesters in Sudan?
Congresswoman Omar, thank you. As to our partnerships, and you mentioned Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, and there's some other partners that are either developing or devolving in some cases. All of our partnerships on a security sense, including some that are economic, are predicated on our interests, on U.S. interests. But that's not new. That's not unique to this administration or the previous administration or back to the time of Washington. We develop partnerships because of what works best for U.S. interests. Mm-hmm. It doesn't preclude us, though, from holding partners accountable, not just on human rights, access to civil society, but also holding accountable on protecting our interests. And so when we're either provision of a weapon system or a capacity or a certain kind of sustainment, with that comes a relationship. So it's a long-term investment. That is what makes us unique to our adversaries.
To the question of how can we assure that this partnership can be trusted to protect us from eventually having some of our weapons end up in the hands of terrorists is my question, and making sure that it doesn't go into murdering political protesters in Sudan, because what we have seen is that our weapons have been used to assault schools, bridges, hospitals in places like Yemen. We've seen the Saudis' involvement and their footprint in Libya. We've seen their involvement and footprint in Somalia with Al-Shabaab. So what I'm asking you is, how can you assure the American people that we are not emboldening them to continue to reign their terror in destabilizing that region when we trust them to be a partner in stabilizing it?
Yeah. Saudi Arabia has been a longtime security partner in the region for almost 40 years. It does not and never has precluded us from accountability.
All right. We just watched the full exchange, and wow, did Clark Cooper deliver. It was a real masterclass in staying calm under pressure and simply laying out the facts. Ilhan Omar came in strong, using words like brutal regimes, immoral, and terrorists, trying to frame the entire U.S. policy of selling arms as some kind of evil complicity. It's almost as if she forgot that the world didn't just start in 2016. Her argument about trusting a thief to protect your shop sounds more like a catchy slogan than serious foreign policy analysis. It might energize a political base, but it overlooks the complicated realities of international relations. She pointed to situations in Bahrain, Egypt, Libya, and Sudan, attempting to link them all directly to U.S. arms sales as if it were a simple cause-and-effect relationship. But this is where Cooper calmly shifts the conversation. He reminds her that U.S. partnerships, including those with Saudi Arabia and the UAE, are built around American interests. That's the key point. These relationships aren't about permanent friendship. They're about protecting American citizens and safeguarding national security. Then he makes an important point. This approach isn't new, and it isn't unique to any recent administration. He emphasizes that the strategy goes back generations, all the way to the era of George Washington. In other words, the idea that this is some brand new or sinister policy simply doesn't hold up. When Omar presses further, asking whether Americans can be assured that U.S. weapons won't fall into the wrong hands, Cooper reframes arms sales as long-term strategic relationships. It's not just about handing over weapons, it's about influence, training, cooperation, and building capabilities with partners who serve broader strategic interests, even if those partners aren't perfect. He closes by noting that Saudi Arabia has been a security partner for nearly 4 decades, and that this partnership has never prevented the United States from holding partners accountable. That point underscores how these relationships are built over time around mutual interests, while still allowing room for oversight and accountability. Throughout the exchange, Cooper stays composed and focused. He doesn't raise his voice or get rattled. He simply explains the historical and strategic reasoning behind U.S. foreign policy. And by doing that, he highlights how complicated the geopolitical landscape really is and why these long-standing alliances continue to play a role in American security.